Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, October 18th, 2020. If you are in the United States of America, early voting is starting all over the place very soon. I was able to vote here in Texas just the other day. I know that Florida's opening up in a few days, and then the actual election's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So as a reminder, we put up a Just Vote message, which is out there on shows from last week. Please take a look at that as well. If you are watching us live right now, directly above the chat, there's a donation box up there. 100% of your donations go directly to the ACA to help support this show, our other shows, and all the efforts that we're doing. In addition, if you would like, there's merchandise available. Then you can go to bit.ly/AEN merch and get your coffee mugs and t-shirts and all that kind of stuff. You can also join the YouTube channel as a member. There's a membership button there as well. And you can support us on Patreon as well, patreon.com/the Atheist Experience. There's a couple of new Facebook groups that we've been promoting, encouraging everybody to go out and hit up. And that's the AXP Atheist Experience fan group, which is AXPFG. And then there's also the Atheist Experience private fan group, which is AXPPFG, both of them over there at Facebook. I don't know, as I haven't been over to check out the new Facebook groups, what everybody thinks about them, but please go and make use of them, talk to the admins, and thank the people there who are, doing this and trying to keep safe and sane places for people to interact, including, the ACA Discord, which I don't mention nearly often enough. As a reminder, this show is awesome, not because of me. It's a little awesome because of Jim, but it's mainly awesome because of these people who are there working on the crew, behind the scenes, grabbing phone calls, screening calls, making sure the video's working, the audio's working, dealing with any tech issues that arise. They're the ones that make this show happen, and I am eternally grateful. Also, before we get to callers, so Jim's going to be in charge today, and Jim is going to be picking all the callers because I'm in that mood. But also, today is Jim's birthday, so everybody out there should be grateful and appreciative, and please pass on a very happy birthday to Jim Barrows, who's joining me today as co-host. How are you?
Oh, not doing too bad. Just another day.
Just
and
another
having
day.
some fun. Yeah. And so, and Matt did lay down a challenge to harsh his mellow. So
I'm going to see what you can do. I don't think you can.
All right. Well, we'll give it a shot. So you ready to get started?
I am ready. Bring it on. Ask me the question, Bridgekeeper. I'm not afraid.
Yeah, that's what they all said. All right. So Kel in Utah will be on. Yeah, and you are on.
Hey.
How's it going?
Wow. I didn't expect to get on first. Hey, doing great. Thanks. How are both of you?
Doing pretty good. Doing
all right. Hey, Kel.
Hey. So I have been listening to the Atheist Experience for quite a bit. Well, I've been listening to it quite a bit for the last couple of months since I became an atheist. And I used to be Mormon, and most of my family still is. Mm-hmm. My younger brother, who I'm really close with, he wants to go on a Mormon mission, and I'm kind of in a bind because I obviously want to have a good relationship with him. I don't want to, damage that. But at the same time, having served one myself, I don't know. I feel like he's about to do something I would consider pretty unethical and that can really hurt a lot of people. And I'm really struggling to know how to kind of broach that topic with him. So I just wanted to run it by you guys and see what advice you had.
Well, what do you think is the most empathetic thing you could do for your brother?
Empathetic, did you say?
Yes, empathetic.
I think that the most empathetic thing I could do would probably be try and prevent him from experiencing the same negative things that I did when I served a mission, and kind of like the guilt that I still carry and about the things that I did and taught people, and that's kind of, yeah, I think that's like the most empathetic thing. On the flip side, I also think that there's a good argument for recognizing that in his spot, he genuinely believes a lot of the stuff that he genuinely believes that going out is going to help people. And so I don't want to cause him pain either by, or, strain on the relationship by saying, hey, I know you think you're going out to help people, but this actually can cause a lot of damage to you and the people you interact with. And here's how and why.
So Kel, does your brother know that you're no longer a Mormon and are an atheist?
Yeah. And that's actually part of what makes it difficult is since I told my family, I've definitely noticed I've lost a lot of credibility and kind of, I can't really say the same things or speak the same way that I could before without triggering a pretty big reaction from a lot of them. And he's not very confrontational. So he generally just kind of, if religion comes up, kind of goes with like, well, I just want to make sure everyone's getting along and, we'll talk about it later type thing, just kind of brushes it away type thing.
So if your brother still talks to you, he knows who you are, he knows that you're no longer a believer, he's not confrontational. I don't understand what the problem is, because it seems that you could just sit down with your brother and say, hey, before you go do this, and you need to follow your conscience and do whatever it is that you think is right, let me tell you how I feel about my mission, how I felt about it at the time, and why I feel that way, just so that you can go into this with eyes open and, make up your own mind. But if you find that your mission experience is vastly different from mine, I'd be interested in hearing that too. It's not like you need to take action to protect your brother from making mistakes. It's provide people with the information and let them know that there's someone there who cares to actually have the discussion with them and interact. Okay, maybe he'll go on a mission, maybe he won't. Maybe his mission will be better because you've given him some information so he can keep his eyes open. Maybe he'll love it and be a Mormon forever. But your responsibility is not to protect people from doing things that you feel is a mistake, as much as it is to provide them the benefit of your life experience and the encouragement and permission to go on and make the mistakes on their own. I've made a fuck ton of mistakes, and some of them people warned me about in advance.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just have to keep in mind what your end goal is. If you want to keep him as your brother, you've got to make sure you're supportive and that you're a good brother to him first and an atheist second.
Yep.
Yeah.
And by the way,
no, I think that's, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So my brother is probably, I don't know why I even put the word probably there. My brother is my best friend on the planet. We don't interact as much as I do with some other people, but we are incredibly close. And he's been supportive and proud of everything I've done, even though we don't necessarily disagree on the religion subject, though we're agreeing, on many things. At no point did I go to my brother and say, hey, you believe some really bad things, here's why. And I think you should do this, or I think you should do that. Instead, my brother knew from the get-go that I am always going to be his brother and that he can talk to me whenever he wants. And we do. I mean, I talked to him today, actually, just a couple hours ago. And I love that. And there have been times where we had things that we disagreed about, and it was never a big enough issue. And there are plenty of things where we could have had serious disagreements and didn't, because we trust each other and we love each other and we know that we can be open and honest with each other. That's far more important to me than whether or not my brother believes in a God.
Okay.
You know where your brothers are being sent?
Yeah, no. Yeah, he's going to California. So fortunately not.
He's doing his mission at Disneyland.
Yeah. Encourage him to go see Disneyland.
So I hate to say this, Kel. Have you seen the Book of Mormon, the musical?
I've started watching it in pieces, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it all the way through yet, though.
Yeah, it's funny.
But yeah, encourage him to go do some things and to experience California as well as do his mission. I mean, it's not like California is lacking in things to do or places to see that are relatively unique and fun. So whether that's, Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, I'm forgetting bunches, I'm sure, beaches.
I'm waiting for the Mormon church to send a mission group like directly to my house. Or, once the Backstreet Boys reunion tour is over, directly to the Atheist Community of Austin building to come down and, it's not all that impressive to send, Mormons out to just randomly talk to people who don't know anything at all about religion, especially their quirky religion. So why not send them to people who know? Why not have them? Like I do a lot of work with Jimmy Snow on the Line Network. Why not just have them all come talk to Jimmy, who's a former Mormon, or a foreman, as I like to call him?
Yeah, it's it's a good question. I actually think that part of that is the tricky part about it is that it's not quite as severe as you might see, and from what I understand from like Telltale Atheists and some others about Jehovah's Witnesses, but there is definitely a bit of like a shunning culture in
Right.
Mormonism, to the point that, Matt, you kind of mentioned, like, hey, maybe offer just to say, hey, here's some of the good and the bad and the whatever I learned from my mission. If you go, then this will help you have a better one either way. And if you don't, then whatever, great. And what I actually left the Mormon church about 6 months ago. And previous to leaving, I had actually had that conversation with him because he was filling out his papers and getting ready to go and all that. I was like, hey, let's get lunch and I'll talk to you, give you advice, stuff like that. And he was all for it. But then when he found out that so that happened before I left. And then when I told him a few weeks later, he texted me, he's like, hey, I know that I said that we should sit down and get, lunch, and talk about mission, but I'm not really sure if I'm comfortable with that right now. Kind of between the lines because you left. And so that's kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, where I feel like kind of my credibility and my whatever in general with him and my family is kind of under question and at stake a little bit, and things that
Then you need to stop.
should be totally normal.
The most important thing you need to do right now is to respect other people's boundaries, because there's going to come a time when you're going to want them to respect yours. And so if they're aware that you're willing to have these conversations, and you don't have to remind them of it every day. But if somebody tells you that they're not comfortable having that conversation, or they're not comfortable having that conversation yet, all you have to do is say, that's fine. I want you to know I'm willing to talk about it whenever you are comfortable, if you ever get there. And that's it. Anything else runs the risk of coming across even more preachy than they're likely to be.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you're going through the angry atheist phase, it's even doubly hard, right?
Yeah. One more thing, what?
No, for sure. Sorry, one clarifying question on that, and then I'll let you get on to the other callers. So the kind of ethical bind I felt comes, specifically, for example, like teaching illegal immigrants about the church, and then telling them that in order to join, they had to be legally married, and that they would have to leave the country to go get legally married back in their country of origin, and then come back, right? Like just this wacky, crazy stuff that's functionally translated into like, you need to rip your family apart, potentially go back to a dangerous country, and do all this just so that you can come and be part of my Jesus club. Or, telling LGBTQ people, oh, hey, you're not truly gay. You just suffer from this mental whatever. And if you pray hard enough, right, you're going to be better. Like some really awful, disgusting stuff that I feel terrible about now. And I don't,
the thing is,
it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, yeah.
The thing is, you can take action. You can take action, and you can actively, publicly, robustly speak out against every single thing you're pointing to without ever talking to your brother or whoever else about it if they don't want to at all. You can inform the public about this stuff and work towards changing it. It's not your brother isn't the problem here. It is the beliefs and positions that he holds that are sanctioned by the church, and you can challenge those directly and openly without having that conversation with your brother.
Yeah. And until you repair your relationship with your family and you kind of get over this awkward period, you're not going to be able to talk to them about anything about this. I mean, you need to kind of, repair that rift a little bit before they can assume that you're talking, remind them that you're still the same person you were before they found out you're an atheist. And then you can kind of move from there. But until you're back on that kind of ground, it's going to be difficult, I think, to actually talk to your family about any of that.
So if I understand kind of what you're both saying, there might be some sort of maybe ethical responsibility to push back against the unethical things I see, but the most effective route isn't necessarily, hey, brother, don't do this. It might just be, advocating for it in my own life, however I can, and then repairing kind of family relationships. And then if and when they're ready to talk and open to it, talking about it then. Is that kind of what I'm getting from you both?
Yeah. I think it's a fair summation.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. The key thing is, you don't have to change or fix or argue with your brother to work towards educating people about problems with Mormonism, and especially with Mormon missions and the very objections that you raised. I didn't have conversations with my mom for many, many years about religion. And yet every single week, or almost every single week, I was on this show having those conversations with the people that wanted to, the people that call in. We don't make outgoing calls on the show. I generally don't go looking for people to have an argument with. I wait for the arguments to come to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, this is exactly what I was kind of hoping for. You guys have given me a lot to kind of think about, and I really appreciate it. And it's, I think it's helping me feel a little better about the situation. Just, kind of having that objective third party kind of look at it. And, I like kind of the idea too of, hey, you know what, you can still fight for change and improve change, and, just focus on the most effective way of doing that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be tracking your brother down. It can be, there's a lot of other ways to do that. So anyway, I appreciate it a lot. And, thank you both.
Great. Thanks so much.
Good luck.
Yep. Hey, have a good one, guys. Keep it up.
Yeah, family is always hard. And especially if you're in that angry atheist phase where you're just kind of reeling at everything you used to believe, and you're trying to wrap your head around it and all that, it can be very, very difficult to deal with family under those circumstances.
Yeah, I am, it's one of those things where I understand what some people are going through, and yet I can't fully understand what others are going through, because we've heard from teenagers who've been kicked out of their parents' home because they don't share those beliefs anymore. We have to find a way to relocate them. I have family members who've said and done, terrible things to other people. Yeah. Whereas despite the problems that I've had, I'm still on good terms with my parents. I called my dad to wish him happy birthday 12 days ago. And we still have conversations, and yet family's a weird thing.
Yes.
Because what you're really saying is, by and large, I'm related to these people either through blood or some legal interaction. And that puts us in a position where, for some reason, we have to get along even if we don't sometimes like each other. And I pretty much have said no to that. Jen Peoples repeatedly pointed out that your family when you act like family, and that she doesn't care if you're blood related or legally associated or not. And so there are people in my life who I count as family. And there are people who I'm legally and by blood related to who I don't count as family anymore. And it's all because the first priority is to make sure that my life isn't full of toxic relationships and people who are trying to fix me at every corner rather than having the conversation. And similarly, yeah. And that's what I was saying. It's similarly, the guy that just called, you shouldn't be the toxic influence on your brother's life. Just be a good person and a good brother. Have the conversations when you have the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. So Al in Poland wants to talk to us about how AXP is going to help transition people to becoming atheists. Hey, Al, how's it going?
I'm doing very well.
Excellent. So you wanted to talk about how this show helps people transition to being atheists?
Well, okay. So if I could give you some short, brief background. I was raised in a Lutheran family in Sydney, Australia, taken to church every Sunday. But I started having doubts when I was 7. And by the time I was 10 or 11, I was able to tell my parents, hey, I don't believe in this anymore. And I've embraced science and things like that since then.
How'd your parents react?
I know. I recognize it was so easy for me. But how difficult must it be for some people who spend a large part of their life believing to change, to transition?
Well, it depends on the person. I mean, for me, I can't actually point to the day or even necessarily the year that I stopped believing. I estimate it 10 to 15 years ago, but I can't actually point to one thing. We have other hosts on this show who can point to a day and a moment even. So, and I know people who, a lot of people in the ACA who are friends of mine who are in that same boat. They can point to specific things, or some of them are a little bit fuzzier, but and some came, more roundabout ways. So it can be very, very difficult depending on your background. It can be one of the most difficult things you do because you're going to turn your back on family. And I have friends who are atheists who have had to do exactly that. Who could have no more contact with their family because it's so toxic, and they kind of knew that before it happened. So it depends.
I understand that, but how old were you when you kind of identified as atheist?
Between my 30s and 40s.
Same here.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting for me because I was a child and I went, hey, this is all stupid. But
yeah, if I would have been 7 years old and told my parents it was all stupid, not only would I don't know how much I would have gotten, like a spanking or what sort of punishment there would have been, but there would have been punishment. And my ass well, you couldn't really have me in church any more than I was, because I was there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and all kinds of stuff. So I was in church all the time. But if I had said that, there's no way my parents would take it well. And so you have to recognize that anyone who at 7 years old can just tell their parents, this religion stuff's nonsense, I don't want anything to do with it, and their parents are okay with that, already probably weren't in a pretty religious environment to begin with.
Oh, hold on. I 7 was when I got my first doubts, and I told my parents when I was 10 that I didn't want to go to church anymore.
Everything that I just said about doing it at 7, everything that I just said about doing it at 7 would have been true at 10 as well.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it would have been true at 17.
However, let's say someone, I don't know how to actually put this, but someone who has based his existence or his or her existence on that something will live on after you die and things like this, to be confronted by the nothingness, it has to be difficult. I count myself extremely lucky. And
it can be difficult.
The call screener is, does this program help? Sometimes, if you don't mind me saying, Matt gets a bit aggressive.
Really? We had noticed.
Is that someone who wants to transition?
In 15 years, you're the first person to mention that. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. And you would be surprised, I think, if you go back and listen to this show's entire back history and listen to the number of people who say, hey, this show actually helped me over the last 20 some odd years, you would be surprised. If you had access to our email, you'd be even more surprised. If you were to show up at the library when COVID goes away, you would be surprised at how many people show up there. And are making, for lack of a better word, a pilgrimage to the show and to watch it live, because that's what changed their lives for the better. So I think you'd be surprised at the number of people. What we don't hear from as much, or if at all, is the number of people we may completely turn off of atheism because of any one host's approach, whether it's Matt's or mine or Jenna's or Jen Peoples or any former host or any current host. We're only going to reach a certain number of people, and we can do what we can do. And if it's not AXP, maybe it's the line. Maybe it's watching a debate that happened 10 years ago that happens to be on YouTube. Maybe it never happens, but we're only going to reach so many people, and we do reach people. So
the other thing is that while I don't pretend that I get it right all the time, I think the overwhelming majority of the time when people want to claim that I'm aggressive, I think it's justified. I think that when you get people in here, but see, some of the confusion is that, like, let's say someone calls in and they're trying to defend a biblical notion of slavery, which happens all the time. And they are dishonestly representing what the book says, or they've called in to tell me I'm wrong. Like literally last week, somebody called in to tell me I was wrong. And if you tell me I'm wrong, you better fucking bring your A game. And in this case, what we find out, hang on. What we find out is that I wasn't wrong. And the times when people are like, oh, Matt's angry, generally, nobody's ever seen me angry on the show. There are only a handful of people who have ever seen me truly angry in real life. I'm pretty laid back, but I value the truth and I value honesty in argument. And if you think that when I'm talking to, let's say, a Christian apologist on the phone, that I'm trying to change their mind, and that when I get irritated, this runs counter to them changing their mind, the mistake that someone has made is assuming that I'm trying to change that person's mind. I'm not. I'm trying to change the mind of the thousands of people sitting at home who agree with that person, who don't want to be publicly embarrassed for believing ridiculous and immoral things. And so I'm not doing it for the caller's benefit. I'm happy if the caller changes their mind, but I'm doing it for the people watching at home. And well, anybody can complain and say, oh, I have a better way. You should do your show this way because it's better. I ask them the same thing. What data do you have? Because I have 15 years worth of data of doing this show and showing what works and what doesn't work. And I've thousands upon thousands of minds changed to the point where there's not an event that I can go do where there aren't a dozen people walking up to thank me and the atheist community of Austin for putting forward the content that helped them change their lives. So I'm not all that interested in the tone trolling or tone policing, because at no point am I saying that my way is the only way or that my way is the right way or that I should only do things a certain way. As a matter of fact, I think I've done things about every possible way someone could, and it's worked.
Okay, I really was there to ask a question, but I suspected that you were going to say it was for the listeners' benefit rather than the caller's benefit that you argue with them. However, just as a side issue, have you ever thought, because I have, what is the motivation of the people who call in to argue for a theistic point of view?
They have different motivations. They don't all call for the same reason. Some of them are calling in because they're convinced that I'm wrong and working for Satan and that I need to be exposed. Others are calling in because they have genuine doubts and curiosity and want to engage in conversation. You can't sum everybody up and dump them all in one bucket.
I didn't want to do that.
I wasn't saying you did. Sorry, let me rephrase that. One can't or shouldn't dump everybody into a bucket. There are lots of different reasons people call.
Okay, cool. I often think that some people ring up to argue for God because, in fact, they doubt what they actually are trying to say.
Yeah, I literally just said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's. I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
Yeah. And if we had more time on each call, we could probably get into people's motivations.
Saying hello. The atheists in Poland love the show.
Great.
And the snooker invitation is still on, Matt.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Al. I'd love to do that. I played some snooker when I was in London last. But yeah, if I get to Poland, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Al.
It's a strange thing that it's an interesting question. What is the motivation behind the person who called?
Yeah.
The problem is, I don't know that we are in any position to find out what that motivation is. If someone tells me, I called because you're wrong and I want to prove it, I'm just going to take them at their word. And if they called and said, I'm calling because I'm curious and I'm having doubt, I'm just going to take them at their word because I can't actually read people's minds. And if I were to ask someone, what is your, like if we had call screeners who at the end of a call came in and said, please tell us your thoughts about how that call went with our host and what was your reason for calling? How do you know that you're getting the truth? And while it's a psychological curiosity and something I'm genuinely interested in, I'm more interested in the substantive calls that get to the truth of reality.
Right. And the person themselves may not know exactly what their primary motivation was for calling. They may just felt like calling that day and talking about a topic. So
yeah. There wasn't any football on. I was bored.
Yeah. All right. So next up is going to be, if I can hit the button, Alvin in North Carolina wants to talk about the theory of biblical patterns.
Before we do that.
Oh, he's on.
Okay, Alvin, you're on, but let me make a quick announcement because I didn't want to interrupt you for this. So as soon as I'm done with this, Alvin can go ahead. By the way, we had a board meeting recently, and one of the things that we discussed is that we provide community service funds to help homeless people get bus passes and things like that. And as such, you remember, Jim, what the percentage of we were currently, I know what the money was. I know how many thousands of dollars of bus passes it was, but it was only a portion of the homeless community that was getting this service.
Yeah. It was a small portion, and we're providing most of the bus passes.
I don't
remember what it was. Yeah.
I don't ever want to be in a position, where it looks like, we're doing a show every week asking for more money and more money and more money. Except that it's true that all of your donations go to us and it's all goes to good causes. But I wanted to point out that we have donated thousands of dollars, many thousands of dollars over the past couple of years to get bus passes to homeless people. And we are trying to expand that effort. And so as we've got the donation link up there, there are other ways that you can contribute. We appreciate all of that. And a good portion of what you donate is going, what was it, like $6,500 or something just the other day?
It was. Yeah.
And so we are giving back to our community as best we can. And we can only do that with your help and support. And so I just want to make sure that everybody who's donating, we're all, Jim and I are all volunteers here. We don't get a penny of this. This is going to the organization with good causes, working with other organizations as well. So anyway, I apologize for derailing that. I just realized I forgot to announce it at the top of the show. So Alvin in North Carolina, thanks. You're on with Jim and Matt.
Yes, I had talked to you, Matt, and Jenna a couple weeks ago about the theory of biblical patterns. And Jenna asked me if I had looked in the Quran, which at the time I had not. And since then, I have looked in the Quran, and that's the reason I called back.
Okay. And what is this theory of biblical patterns, if you could, because I was there for that call?
Oh, okay. Well, very quickly, there's 100 patterns in Genesis 1:1 that are beyond chance and beyond mortal capability. And real quick
to
get there?
Well, my first question is how do you know it's beyond chance? And in what language did you study this?
Math.
Okay, you've done the math.
Different language.
What language?
That's rather curious, because if somebody's done the math and shown what the actual odds are, then if you can do the math, then by definition, it is not beyond chance, because you have to have some chance of it happening, and you've actually calculated how likely it is to happen. So it seems to me disingenuous to say, oh, we did the math and it's beyond chance. That's not accurate.
And did you do it in the original language, or did you do it in English? And if you did it in English, did you do it against all interpretations of the Bible and come up with the exact same answer?
Yeah, I did it. I looked at several different languages, and Matt, you're correct. It's not beyond any chance. It's beyond more than a couple deviations. But
so what you're really saying?
Primarily.
So what people are really saying, Alvin, is not that it's beyond chance. It's just that it seems to them that it's incredibly unlikely for this to happen without divine intervention.
Yes, or ET or some higher intelligence.
Can you give us? So you've said
be on Earth.
You said both previous week and this week that there were 100 patterns in Genesis 1:1, right?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
Well, there's lots of different ways of looking at Genesis 1:1. You can look at the values and the places, and okay.
So which version of the Bible should I be looking at for us to talk about the patterns in Genesis 1:1?
The original Hebrew.
The original Hebrew.
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the original Hebrew? Because you'll be the only person on the planet who has an original copy of anything in the Bible.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's been through a lot of iterations, but I'm basically just talking about the first verse. So
sure,
in various places in the Bible, there are questions of which letter, but I'm just talking about the first verse, only the first 7 words.
Yeah, so 7 words. How would you determine how many different ways those 7? How do you get 100 patterns in 7 words? That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, you can look. It's at the theoryofbiblicalpatterns.com. I mean, it's things like, pi, E, and alpha, and the number of words, the number of letters. If you take there's 28 letters, so if you take the 28 places, you find it in pi, and now a lot of it has to do with the factors of the value, which is 37 and 73. That's where a lot of the patterns come from.
What was the website? Because I
found
a theory of biblical patterns, but not. What was the website?
Theoryofbiblicalpatterns.com.
The theory of biblical.
That doesn't even come up in the first level,
patterns.
first couple of for.
Okay, that redirects me to the BibleInTheBible.com.
Yeah, it's the same website. Well, okay, now at the top, there's just 20 verses that says there are patterns in the Bible. But if you click on, I don't have it in front of me, but if you click on patterns.
Is this your website?
100 patterns.
Is this your website? Because I noticed there's something here that says Atheist Experience 10/4/2020, and atheist is spelled wrong. Is that just another pattern of Atheist Experience to spell it wrong?
Oh, no, I guess I made a mistake when I wrote it. Yeah. No, that's just that. Okay. 2 weeks ago when I talked to you, I added a web page just reflecting what I had found in the last 2 weeks. And if you click on that link, that's what you'll find. It just there's like a couple hundred classic books that I've looked at, and the Quran, and in Arabic and English and so forth. Well, all my results are on that page. If you click that link, that's what you'll find. But I didn't know I misspelled it.
Yeah, every single time.
Yeah.
You've misspelled the word atheist every single time that I see. It's on the link, but I'm not, this isn't a spelling exam, except that if you're saying that there's 7 words and 100 patterns, I'm still trying to figure out. I looked at the website. I've listened to what you say. I don't mean to be a dick, but the website is a confusing hot mess that doesn't present any information clearly, because within the first page, you say, Dr. Roger Penrose said the universe is fine-tuned to 10 to the 10th to the 123rd, greater than 10 to the power of a googolplex, a multiverse. All of that is true and has nothing to do with patterns or anything else. It's like you found some big numbers and made decisions that, you found a pattern that seems like it's unlikely. I'm trying to figure out what's the pattern.
Oh, well, you're right. There's other stuff on the website, but
I'm looking at Genesis 1:1. You say there's 100 patterns in Genesis 1:1. Please describe one pattern, and then if that's clear, describe a second pattern so I can know what the heck you mean. Genuinely, I'm not trying to be awful. I have no idea what you mean by saying there's 100 patterns in Genesis 1:1. There's 7 words in Genesis 1:1.
Well, okay. The easiest ones are there's 7 words. That's okay. 3 and 7 are like the most important digits.
Says who?
7 is by far the most.
Says who?
Well, it's in the Bible. I mean,
I don't care what the Bible
is the
says.
most
If the Bible says 7 is important, that doesn't mean that 7 is important.
No, but you find 3 and 7 together, 37 and 73.
Yes, you find 3s and 7 all over the place. I remember being in church and having the pastor talk about how my body is repeatedly divided into thirds. I have a head, I have a torso, I have legs. My arm has a hand, a forearm, and an upper arm. My fingers have 3 joints. You can find 3 all over the place. But you know what else you can do? You can find 2, because I have a left half and a right half. I have a left ear and a right ear, a left eye and a right eye, a left nostril and a right nostril, a left arm and a right arm. You can find any sort of number, especially the smaller ones that are likely to repeat, almost anywhere. I want to know give me a pattern in 1-1, and why we should care about it.
Well, probably one of the maybe easier to understand is the one I mentioned before, pi e and alpha. There's a 1 in 100,000 chance that any given number would be any 5-digit number, and Genesis 1:1 creates pi, which is 1 in 100,000.
How does Genesis 1:1 create pi?
Well, let's see. The letters times the factor of the letters over the words times the factor of the words, or the multiple of the words. So that's the equation you use. But you get the same thing.
When you said you get pi, do you get 3.14, or do you get 3.14 that just keeps on going forever? And I forget what the next 1,000 digits are, although people have calculated it out to 10,000. When you say it creates pi, have you checked to the same degree of accuracy that people who have calculated pi out to thousands of digits, or are you just saying it's 3.14? Because that's not pi.
No, it's just it's the first 5 digits, so it's 1 in 100,000.
That's not pi.
And the same thing where John
3.14 or 3.14 to the first 5 digits is not pi.
Correct. It is an approximation of pi,
but it is not pi.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But so let's say that Genesis 1:1.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's go ahead and you and I can agree, Alvin, that if you take the words or the letters in Hebrew letters in Genesis 1:1, which are also numbers, that you can perform some sort of mathematical manipulation on it and wind up with pi or first 5 digits of pi, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Now, so irrespective of whether we can do that anywhere else, which I would argue that we absolutely can, and even when you look at it and you're like, oh, it's that to 100,000 or 1 in 100,000, what does that mean? To find that you can do some sort, like the Bible doesn't tell you what mathematical calculation to do. And so if somebody sits around with a bunch of numbers, like a random string of 10 characters, 10 numbers, and a goal that they're trying to get to. Have you ever seen the show Countdown from the UK?
No.
It's brilliant. And I would recommend that when you go watch Countdown, you should start with the regular Countdown and do not watch 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown. But Countdown is a game that's played in kind of 2 rounds. One of them, you get a sequence of English language consonants and vowels, and you have to create the longest anagram out of that random assortment that you can. The other one is that you pick a handful of a handful of numbers of different values, and then a random number pops up on the screen, and you have to, through calculation, combine the numbers that you were given to reach the total that is at the top of the screen as close as you can. Now, there are some occasions where it just can't be done, that there's no amount of calculation that you can use given this, strictures and the rules. Obviously, they don't allow, factorial and all that stuff. But just using plain mathematics, sometimes, very rarely, there are things that you cannot get to the goal. But the rest of the time, you can. And it happens over and over and over again. Now, if we have a game show where people sit down and are given a random sequence of numbers, and a random number to target, and they consistently, through basic math, reach that total, why is it remotely impressive that you found pi, or the first 5 digits of pi, through your random calculate? It's not random. You get to choose when you multiply, when you divide, when you add and subtract. And your entire process of determining what the calculation is, your entire process is based on what you find at the end. And so if you did multiply, divide, plus, minus, boom, 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 and you ended up with 4.2897, well, you'd say, well, that's not a non-result. But on those occasions where you get like 3.141592, then you say, this is significant. It's like dealing out a hand of cards. If you dealt the cards a full deck so that each person has 13 cards, what are the odds that someone would get all 13 spades?
Well, pretty low.
Yeah, it's really, really low. It's 1 in, well, the odds of getting 13 cards of the same suit are 1 in 158,753,389,900. That's the odds. And yet it has happened because people play bridge and people have had perfect bridge hands, which require getting that particular combination. And it's happened more than once where someone's gotten a perfect bridge hand. 1 in 158 billion, despite the fact that there probably haven't been anywhere near that many games of bridge played. And so that's really unlikely, and yet it happens. Right?
Yes.
But what if instead of getting 13 cards of the same suit, you got a different set of 13 cards, a 2 of clubs, a 5 of spades, a 7 of diamonds, an 8 of hearts, a jack of spades, a queen of clubs, a king of diamonds, etc., so that they weren't all the same suit? What are the odds of getting those 13 cards?
The same odds. It's very low.
Exactly the same odds. And the only difference between that one hand, which is a garbage hand in spades or in euchre, or, well, not euchre, but spades and bridge, the only difference is that we prioritize them. The bits of cardboard don't know anything. The math doesn't know anything. And so you have this incredibly unlikely outcome that is happening every single game. If you deal an entire deck out to 4 people, the odds of any 13 specific cards, be they 13 of the same suit or 13 nonsensical cards or meaningless cards for the game, the odds are exactly the same, which means in every single game that has ever been played of bridge, every time the cards are dealt, there are 4 people that receive a hand of cards, and the odds against that specific hand is 1 in 158,753,389,900. And that's happening over and over and over again. And what you're doing is finding something that you view as significant. Oh, here's the 5 digits of pi. Ta-da! Oh, here's this thing that I attribute significance to. That's what you're doing when you go through and do this math. I highly recommend you watch Countdown. It's a great game.
Yeah. And do you know what the top 11 most common numbers are?
Well, no, not offhand, no.
1, 2, 0, 3, 5, 4, 10, 000, 6, 8, and 7. You know, there's all kinds of mathematical analysis we can do on texts, but what does that mean? Just because something's against the odds doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I mean, the infinite monkey theorem still stands, right? If you're given an infinite number of monkeys and an infinite number of typewriters and an infinite amount of time, you'll eventually produce the works of Shakespeare. We know that this is true. So I don't know why, even if your math is correct, why that points to anything other than, oh, wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So how do you get from your math to a God?
Well, the difference is because we're not looking in a billion different books. We're looking in the most read book in the world.
Doesn't matter.
First verse.
Doesn't matter.
And we're looking for the most common universal constant. So we're not looking in
No, you're not.
We're looking
Same
one.
question.
No, if you say if in the first chapter you found pi, that would be significant, and if you found phi, that would also be significant, wouldn't it? So, how many different mathematically significant possible results could you go for?
And how many books have actually been written
and part of
since humans started writing.
Yeah, and you'd have to also look at languages that, let's like there's not a proper letter numerical value for letters in English unless you do like a, the A to Z 1 to 26 type thing. But like there are other things about this that are predictable, because when you're looking at what is written, you are looking at something that already includes an intended pattern. Actually, it includes multiple intended patterns. The letters form the words that are there as a pattern. So like if I were to ask you, Alvin, pick a number between 1 and 10. Go ahead.
7.
Yes. And I have a 7 of diamonds, which was already here in my hand, because that is the single most common response to this. I can look like I can predict what's going legitimately. There's no other cards in my hand. 1 7 of diamonds, because I knew you were going to say 7. Or did I? The truth is I didn't know you were going to say 7, but it was a really, really, really strong likelihood, because when you ask someone to pick a number between 1 and 10, 7 is overwhelmingly the most common number chosen. And you could look like you're prescient, like you're a genius magician, etc., when really you're just playing the odds. And so I will look at your website on your patterns found in the Bible. But I have to say, you would be better off actually sending them to mathematicians if they pay any attention to you, because your particular version of the Bible code, it doesn't seem to be getting any traction. It seems to be just you.
Yeah, and I mean, you still. So how do you get from, given all the books that have been written, including the ones we don't know about, right? Because they no longer exist because they're in the Library of Alexandria. They were books or scrolls that were in pagan temples in Italy, and Christians destroyed them, and other religions destroyed other religion stuff and all that kind of stuff. How do you get to God from this? How do you get there? Just because it's against the odds doesn't mean it didn't happen naturally.
I know we've talked a lot.
You have to also look at the sub patterns.
Okay.
So the same question. The question hasn't changed. How do you get from this to God? It obviously the odds of it happening are right now 100%, right? They did happen. We see I'm accepting what you say is true. You see these patterns. What I'm wondering is, how do I get from, oh, look, these are interesting, to, oh, there's actually a God?
By the mathematics, because I've shown it to 579 digits.
So what?
And you also have
again, I'm accepting your math is true. Just because it's against the odds, obviously it happened. So, I mean, so what? It happened. How do you get to God from there?
Well, if you look at all the sub patterns with pi e and alpha, it's a lot more than just pi, and it's in like the trillions that
Same question.
Just that one pattern occurred.
Same question.
But because it's in one book, in one verse, in one universal constant.
How many books out of all of those that have been written have you done the same analysis to determine that this is unique?
Well, as an example, I looked at a number of classics. I looked at about 20,000 sentences, pseudo sentences, and I was able to find like the first 12. That I was able to find a sentence that had the first 12 patterns.
So 20,000 sentences isn't even close to a large number. I said, how many volumes, how many books, and what percentage of that is the total that have been written since then?
See,
well, out of the 20 million, I found one in 20 million.
20 million books?
Exactly what you'd expect.
20 million
20
books.
million sentences.
I didn't ask about sentences.
Well, if
I asked about books.
I'd look at it.
I asked how many books.
So I have a question.
Oh, I don't know. It was like 100 books or something.
Oh, 100 books? I've read more than that in the last 5 years. I'd say the last 3 years, but I might be pushing it. So I'm not really impressed by 100 books.
See, the thing is, I'm looking at your thing here. And by the way, you have 100 patterns in Genesis 1:1 that you claim prove divine authorship in the Bible. If Genesis 1:1 didn't fit this pattern, but Matthew 1:1 did, would you have accepted that?
Well, it wouldn't have been as impressive.
Why not?
Well, because Genesis 1:1 is the very first verse.
So you've decided. So first of all, you begin with Genesis 1:1. It's more impressive there because it's the first one. And then you begin with this notion that somewhere else in the Bible, it says God's digits are 3 and 7, and 3 is for the Trinity and 7 is for divine perfection, when there's no evidence of a Trinity and no evidence for divine and no evidence for divine perfection. And then you're like, here's your part of your 100. The number of words in Genesis 1:1 is evenly divisible by 7. Big deal. That's true for every sentence that has 7 words. The number of letters is evenly divisible by 7. Sorry?
Yeah, well, that's one. The first one is 1 in 7.
No, it's not.
The first 28 are like 1 in 20 million or something.
No. You don't get to just so what are the odds that I would have been born in Kansas City, Missouri?
100%.
Well, like 1 in
now it's 100%. But you don't get to say it is unlikely that Matt was born in Kansas City, and unlikely that he was born on March 31st, and unlikely that he was born at this time, and unlikely that he was born in this year, and unlikely that he was born in these parents. And you don't get to multiply those together to say that it was astronomically improbable that Matt would be born when he was born. That's what you're doing with this. You are butchering math, which is why nobody's paying attention to this. And even if you were correct, even if all of the things you say about Genesis 1:1 is correct, that still does not in any way demonstrate that it was authored by a God. In fact, if that were enough to conclude that God is the author of this, then that would be concrete evidence of God, in which case God could just come forward and say, yep, I authored it. So why is God still hiding? If you found God, you've sussed through Genesis 1:1 and you've found proof of God, why is God still absent and hiding? And why do you have to call around to try to get attention on a website that nobody's paying attention to? Why is God punking you?
Well, that's what the 20 verses at the beginning say, is that God's telling us that they're hidden.
If he's hidden, how come you found him and I can't?
Well, I'm not the only one that found him. I mean, I got some of them from other people.
I'm not convinced. How do I know that you found him? I have yet to see any evidence that somebody has found God. He's playing the best game of hide and seek ever.
Any of the three of them.
A lot of them came from Dr. Ivan Panin 150 years ago.
100 years ago, according to your website, unless your website's 50 years old or typoed. But since you misspelled atheist, maybe it is.
No, 100 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, and you still haven't demonstrated, and like Matt pointed out, the odds of him being born on the day to the parents in the place are astronomically against, and yet 100% chance that it happened because it did. So this goes back to my question of let's assume your math is correct. How does that get you to anything? Because we've written enough books of varying lengths to include, because the Bible is a bunch of smaller books.
I need a mathematician. Because I just got down to the end of the list. Are you the one that added like the ones closer to 100, like 99, 98, 9, and 100?
Yeah, I did most of the latter ones.
Sure. So this latter one, you say Genesis 1:1 is found in phi. You do realize that phi is an irrational number that doesn't repeat, and so you'd be able to find it's a matter of fact, it would be more miraculous to not find the 7 words in Genesis 1:1 within the digits of phi than to actually find it, right?
Right. And same with pi.
But in every case, I've done the mathematics to show that it's improbable.
No, it's not improbable. It is
actually
no, sir. It is virtually certain. That is the point. If you were to start flipping a coin right now, how many heads in a row would you need to get before you thought something fishy was going on?
Oh, well, maybe 10 or so.
Sure. But if you flipped a coin over and over again, 10 billion times, do you think you'd hit on 10 heads in a row at some point?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you do understand this. And that's why 10 heads, by the way, bigger than 7 words. Not surprising at all that we find Genesis 1:1 in pi. Did you look to see if you could find Genesis 1:2 in pi?
I bet you can.
Well, and I bet you didn't, because you seem to put priority on this first verse. Yeah.
And hey, do you think you could find the first sentence in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit in pi?
You would not find all 100 type patterns. No.
No,
Oh,
I
you
didn't
would find
ask
a
that.
few.
I didn't ask that. I asked, do you think you would find the first sentence of The Hobbit in either pi or phi or any other irrational number?
If you look far enough, yes, because of
Yeah.
probability.
Oh,
Congratulations.
That's our
why.
point.
So I thank you for the call, Alvin. I have nothing more to say. It's interesting. I'll take a look at the website, but I
Math is weird.
you need
so
to
are
get
numbers.
some mathematicians to look at this, and it is what I thought it was from the beginning, which is another Bible code, just not an equidistant letter one. In this case, instead of looking for equidistant letters, you're saying, let's pull up every digit of pi, and I will scan through the entirety of it to see if I can find this particular string. Well, congratulations. Just like if we put every monkey on earth banging on typewriters ad nauseum until the end of time, they will write your Bible word for word.
Or the works of Shakespeare. Thanks. Talk to you later. Have a nice day.
Statistically, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's what statistics show.
Yeah, and dropped him. Yeah, that's that's the problem.
It's I get it, because it seems people have done this forever, and the one that they most seem to be attached to is phi, the golden ratio. It's in my favorite cartoon of all time, Donald in Magic Land, and it goes through and it shows examples of how phi appears in nature and how the golden ratio appears here, and how it's this plus this equals this, and it's 1.61809 or 3399 or whatever it is. We are pattern recognition machines. The problem is sometimes that pattern recognition goes into overdrive, which is what has happened with Alvin. Alvin, out of one verse, has found 100 different ways that it is significant, provided, and he's kind of correct, provided you begin by agreeing that the number 3 is significant, the number of 7 is significant, that you are free to use specific combinations in mathematics, but not necessarily any mathematical combination. And every time you get to an answer that you deem significant, like pi to 5 digits, you keep that and count it as a hit. And anytime you stumble across something that doesn't appear to have any significance, you get rid of that and count it a miss. I mean, this is exactly what Alvin is doing.
Right. Counting the hits and ignoring the misses, which doesn't work. And none of that gets you to God anyway, because you need to show that, okay, you have this fact now. How do you get to this? And he's only examined 100 books, which, let's face it, I mean, you have access to more than 100 for free on Google or, Amazon Kindle. So, and this is all just mathematical analysis. So a computer program could do it.
Wow.
The fact that you could do it with he's only done with 100 is even more unimpressive than if he'd done it with like 10,000.
Let's see if we can try and get through. I mean, there's a bunch of theists waiting. We've only got like 25 minutes left on the show. So let's see who we can get through here. Who you got next, Jim?
RJ in Colorado, I think.
Sure.
All right, RJ in Colorado, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. So, I've called in a few times before, but sorry, I didn't think I was going to get put on this quick. So I personally don't believe. I know you guys might believe it, but that Christianity has spread throughout the globe.
At the point of a sword. Yep.
I think that's coincident.
I'm sorry.
Point of a sword.
I think that. What's up?
You broke up. You're saying that you don't believe Christianity has spread through the globe?
No, I don't believe that it's dominated the globe. Well, in a lot of ways, it's dominated a lot of countries. I don't think that was coincidence. I think that there's a reason.
I don't think it was coincidence either. I think some people convinced other people, and those people convinced other people, and it spread that way. Just like it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, and in the early days of Rome, you could actually be put to death for not being a Christian, and that kind of helped solidify things. You had the Spanish conquistadors spreading across the world and spreading Christianity at the point of a sword. You had, Europe exploring the world. And Christianity was the most popular thing, and Christians were more than willing to kill people who didn't, and so forced their beliefs on large populations.
But I don't understand what the point is.
But
yeah, what's the point?
well, okay, so like for instance, you brought up the conquistadors, the Aztecs, where I would say their paganistic religion was self-destructive. When you compare that to the
I don't care.
How does that change my claim?
Well,
that
well,
they spread it
what I'm
at the
saying
point of a
is that
sword,
the
so it's not that surprising that a technologically superior country,
Let Jim finish.
society spread their religion at the point of a sword.
no, it wasn't all spread, but at the point of the sword.
Nobody's saying it was
A lot
all
of them
spread.
converted.
So here's the thing,
was
RJ.
Not all
RJ.
spread. A lot of the other tribes.
RJ.
You're
RJ.
not even letting me speak.
Correct. I'm
Well, yeah,
trying
go
to
ahead.
make. Yes, I'm interrupting for a point because I don't want you to waste my time or the listeners' time, because Christianity has spread. That is a fact. It has spread through coercion. It has spread through conquest.
No.
I will hang up on you if you keep doing this. It has spread, as a matter of fact, through coercion, through conquest, through convincing people.
Yeah.
I'm maintaining an amazing zen right now, RJ. I triple fucking dog dare you to try to interrupt me again to deny this. Go ahead. I dare you.
Okay, so now wait, hold on just a second. So now
Bye.
Yeah. So Christians gloss over this point, but when Rome made Christianity the official religion, they also put a death penalty on not being Christian.
Yeah.
They destroyed pagan temples of knowledge, because you didn't just go to a pagan temple to worship, you also went to a pagan temple to learn. That's where the universities, what we would call universities today, were. That's where cultural centers were. And so you destroyed a lot more than just a building or just more than just religion. You wiped out knowledge and culture and history and a lot of other things that human societies depend on when you did that. And that all happened at the point of a sword. This is simple fact.
Yeah. So this is what happens. You get a caller who's got a really weak ass point, and they want to portray that. And I not only granted their point, offered them supporting stuff, and did it with alliteration, that Christianity has spread by conquest, which is true, by coercion, which is true, and by convincing people, which is true. Some people have become convinced. Some people are indoctrinated to it. There's nothing remotely controversial about me saying these are the ways in which Christianity is spread. He wants to pretend that Christianity dominated the world and it's just not a coincidence because it's more likely that it spread because it's true. And RJ, you should go talk to Muslims about that.
Yeah, because Muslims have done the same thing. Yeah. Buddhism is probably the only religion that might be able to make the claim they didn't, and are of the top three. But even then. All right, so let's go to Kim in Oregon, who believes there's some evidence for God.
Cool.
Hi, Kim.
I hope it's good evidence, because I would agree if we're going to include testimony that there's anecdotal evidence. But what kind of good evidence do we have?
Right. So first off, I just want to say this is a new thing for me, so I apologize if I fall over myself. But yeah, so a friend of mine wanted me to call in. I don't usually do this, but I'm not a typical Christian. I don't buy into, I'd say, 80% of what Christianity pushes.
Okay.
But I do believe in the Bible. So
hang on, Kim. So I'm going to let you continue, but there's two things I'm going to be curious about. One is, what is the criteria for you determining which portions of a religion you accept and which portions you reject? But if you say you accept the Bible, what does that mean? Does that mean you accept everything in the Bible?
Well, that gets into the weeds, right? Because that's what denominations become. What I believe of the Bible.
Well, it has nothing to do with denominations. I mean, I'm saying the Bible legitimately says things that aren't true, and it also legitimately sanctions and allows things which aren't moral. So I just need to know what you mean when you say you believe the Bible, and which Bible.
Right, and you'll go right. And I get that. So I guess to the first, I forget your first point, but I guess to the question of do I believe in the Bible? I believe first of all, I believe there's a God, right? And I have to go through that foundation, because if we get into trying to determine what part of the Bible is true, then it gets into very denominational.
Is all of your evidence biblical?
No.
Do you have any extra biblical evidence?
Right. So that's kind of what I depend on, because the Bible, like the
Cool, go for it.
And Bill Nye. Okay.
I'm happy. I just want to be clear, Kim. I'm happy for you to make whatever case you want to make. It's just that before you start down that track, be aware that I'm going to be asking what your methodology is that allows you to pick and choose what you want. And I want to know more about this, because if you say, I believe the Bible, I mean, that carries a lot. Like, do you believe the earth was created in 6 literal days? And do you believe it was 6 to 10,000 years ago? Are you okay with slavery? But if your primary goal is to show that you believe that there's a God, go ahead. What is your case for God?
Right. Okay. Yeah. And real quick on the cherry picking, I do believe that as people, kind of like what the show stands for, like, that's why I kind of appreciate you guys being so objective and willing to talk to anybody, because Christians aren't like that. They don't want to bring up any other belief typically. And I think that's kind of what we all have to do. So I do look at the Bible and I have to cherry pick, not say this part is not true in that part, but I have to determine, first of all, is the Bible true, and what out of all the other books. But so regardless of the Bible, that's getting in the weeds, because we have to even establish that we believe the Bible's true, which we're going to pretend like we're not there yet.
Okay.
So I would say, just from history, you find an island full of pagans. Typically, the first response is there is something, right? That is an instinctual reaction.
Sir. No, Kim. Have you not heard of the Paraha? No. You haven't heard of the Paraha?
I'm just saying the majority of civilization.
Okay. I don't know what the majority has to do with anything, because in order for something to be true, and you want to try to use the fact, basically right now you're arguing that pretty much everybody has some sort of gut feeling or impression or leans towards the notion that there is a God. And that's just not true.
Right. I wouldn't say feeling.
And even to the extent,
I don't have any gut feelings towards any of this.
Well, even to the extent that it's true, that people feel a certain way, that is independent of whether or not it's actually true. The Paraha are a tribe, I believe, in the Amazon, where Christian missionaries went to engage with them. They didn't even have a God concept at all. They were baffled. And by the way, the Christian missionary who went down there is no longer a Christian. The Paraha are a prime example that, despite what people want to claim, not everybody, not every culture has a God belief.
Yeah, that's fair. So, I mean, I didn't know about them, but I would believe there'd be some exceptions to that. That's not my basis. So I'm sorry I brought that up.
I get it. No, just okay. What's the case for God?
Okay, so I would say just if I came on an island and I saw the law of, even if I didn't know about the law of entropy, I would deduce that symmetrical flowers, or my 2 eyeballs not being a little off center, or there being some sort of purpose that's actually working, that species can't intersect and create new babies that are freaks, that there's something going on, that there are walls and boundaries and rules, almost like a program that is making everything function to a certain extent, which screams design to just...
No, sir.
Even if I didn't have anyone tell me.
It doesn't scream design.
It doesn't scream design. The fact that there's order in the universe doesn't mean that the order was intended. The fact that there are mechanical processes doesn't mean that those mechanical processes were the result of a decision by a thinking agent. There's nothing about chemistry.
On its own, it doesn't.
On its own. What else are you adding to it? What else are you adding to it? Because it seems that what you're adding to it is a God.
No, what I'm adding is the law that I can observe every day, which is the law of entropy. Which my room's a mess right now, and
your room being a mess has absolutely nothing to do with the law of entropy. Nothing.
Well, can I
So
get
the second
my
law of
perspective on it?
thermodynamics states that the total energy in an isolated system can never decrease over time and is constant if and only if all processes are reversible. Isolated systems spontaneously evolve towards thermodynamic equilibrium, this state with maximum entropy.
You
So
being
how do you
messy.
get to that by observing?
Well, let's say I didn't know that law at all. I don't care what they determine it. I'm just saying off of observation as a person.
That was
and
my
even within
question.
The last 300 years.
How do you just by observation get to that?
Get to that the law of entropy is true?
How do you get to that from just observation? That is the question.
Right. So that's what I was kind of basing on, is that any chance, if I shake, something in a bottle, it's broken up.
That's a closed system.
You never bet that it would ever. Yeah, let's say it's a closed system in a jar.
So
And so
Kim,
let's
Kim,
bust it open and we just put.
Kim, you're missing this. You said that you could observe it every day by looking at your messy room, which has absolutely nothing to do with entropy. Then when asked, you talked about shaking a snow globe type thing or some other sort of closed system. But
Right.
do you think that scientists, when they were sorting out the laws of thermodynamics, did it just by observation? That they looked at a snow globe and said, yep, here's a law of nature. And by the way, you shake up a snow globe, it doesn't trend toward chaos. It trends towards stability. All of those little snowflakes in there trend toward, boom, stopping.
Right. And you don't have closed systems. Right. If we go back to your, wandering onto an island without knowing the laws of thermodynamics, that island is not a closed system. It is in fact open because it's getting energy from the sun. So it's not a closed system. Your snow globe is not a closed system.
Because you're shaking it from outside.
And it's also gaining energy from, if it's outside the sun, if it's inside, then it's picking up and exchanging energy with your air conditioned, house or wherever it happens to be. That is still not a closed system. So in order to say that that in an isolated system, isn't the first thing you have to do is figure out how to isolate a system?
Right. Well, this is just one of the pieces, right? I mean, I'm just, as if we were in a courtroom.
That's not an answer to the question.
Point, right?
Isn't the first step to say
there's no point to get to?
Yeah. The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy of an isolated system could never decrease over time. Wouldn't the first step to proving that part of the definition correct to create an isolated system?
I mean, you'd have to create an isolated system and a non-isolated system and compare the results at a minimum.
Right. So how do you do that? How do you create an isolated system? By just observation, by sailing onto a deserted island. How do you do that using your example?
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, I would say that the universe, closed system, open system, to me, is just for one, even in that same instance, you can't prove evolution, right? We can't observe evolution happening.
Where did we get evolution from?
What the hell are you talking about?
We're talking about the second law of thermodynamics, and you're bringing up evolution completely out of the blue? Come on.
This all builds on that, because that's my belief of a God.
We're talking about
your belief.
Second law of thermodynamics. How do you get there by just observing?
You're saying your belief in a God has something to do with not being able to, second law of thermodynamics not being compatible with evolution? What?
Well, I don't care about the law of thermodynamics. I'm just saying that's what they call it.
Then why did we spend all this time? I promise you, I'm trying to maintain my zen, and Jim's going to lose his long before I am.
I've already lost it.
So why the fuck did we spend all this time talking about the second law of thermodynamics, only for you to say you don't care about it?
Right. And so first of all, we don't even know if the universe is a closed system. However, it may be, right. But what we do know is that our planet is not a closed system because it gets energy from the sun. And so when you look at any system, even a closed one, there could be areas that act like a closed system and areas that don't, as the energy transfers and moves, because it doesn't necessarily move at the same rate. So the second law of thermodynamics does not prove God, right? It doesn't prove that evolution is not possible, because the planet on which evolution is happening, that we know of for sure, ours, is not a closed system. It's getting energy from the sun, at least energy from the sun, less energy from other places, maybe, depending on how you want to look at it, but definitely not that. So this is the second law of thermodynamics. This is what we're talking about. I don't understand. And let's go back to what your original statement was, which was, if you sailed onto an island, you could determine the second law of thermodynamics. And I'm saying you can't prove that you can do that just by being on a deserted island. How do you do that? Because that's what your claim was. That's what we're talking about. Let's leave evolution completely out of this.
Okay. Okay, so that's fair. I would say that my observation would be disorder is in the natural flow of things, unless a lot of energy comes from a design
how do you determine that?
Thinking person.
How do you determine that?
So that was kind of
whoa, hang on. Did you just say unless energy comes from a thinking person?
Unless energy comes from a purposeful or forward-thinking person. Energy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but all of the scientific models about energy have nothing at all to do with whether or not that energy comes from a thinking agent. Energy doesn't need to come from a thinking agent to be a function of
I agree.
A thermodynamics. So why did you bring it up? Every single time. It's like you hang on.
To get order.
Hang on. It's like you spew forth something that you hope makes sense. And then when Jim and I, ooh, that's a good thing, point out that it doesn't work that way, then you diverge and go off somewhere else. We've gone from the second law of thermodynamics to a brief interlude about evolution. And now we're talking about energy needs to be added by a thinking being. You don't seem to have any sort of real foundation in how reality works. And yet it seems like you're trying to make use of science to prove something that science cannot prove. Science can't prove God. There's nothing within science.
Science can't prove God.
Good. So thank you, Kim. If science can't prove God, why the fuck are you talking about science when we asked you about God?
Well, I'd argue it's the same for we can't prove evolution, right?
We have proved evolution. Evolution is an observable fact. Evolution is an observed fact. The theory of evolution by means of natural selection is the
there's more
model
evidence for evolution than there is for gravity.
But in any case, it doesn't matter. Evolution is irrelevant. Even if we couldn't prove evolution at all, you came in to tell us why you believe in God. You spend all this time on science, and then you wind up agreeing that science can't prove God. So why are you wasting our time?
I don't mean to waste your time. I was trying to build my premise on my observation and how we would come to it naturally. But
right, and we immediately jumped on your first mistake, which was second law of thermodynamics.
But you can't come to it naturally. You can't prove God through science, which you already agreed with. So what was the point?
Well, if we're going to go into proving, I would say that's the whole point of what I believe in God. If he proved himself, then there'd be no point to faith. And that's the whole point of
now you have demonstrated that your entire God proposition is useless and worthless.
Yeah,
because basically you're now in the position of saying that you believe something. And while most people would look at it and say there's not enough evidence, your new claim is if there was enough evidence, then that would prove that it wasn't true. But since there's not enough evidence, that makes it all the more true. I mean, that's just bizarre.
Yeah.
You should write down your model. You should write down your model and see how many other gods and supernatural things you would have to accept if we went with your model.
Yeah. And also do yourself a favor and actually study the entire second law of thermodynamics in detail and don't just read answers in Genesis. Thank you very much for your call. I hope that helps. Have a nice day.
Somebody in chat was like, Matt's going to pop. And I'm like, I've been as mellow as I'm nowhere near popping.
I did.
I'm barely not even bothered by this.
Well, it's the same argument. We've done the second law of thermodynamics on a number of occasions, and it doesn't get any better than that. So
we've got one last call, right?
Yeah, we got one last call, and that last call is David in California. Hey, you're on. You want to talk about the Bible is scientifically accurate, specifically Genesis 1?
What's really good? I'm eager for us to get to what David has to say, but David, let me ask you at the beginning. Did you hear the last call?
Yes, I did.
The last caller said that you cannot use science to prove God. Do you agree with the last caller?
I'm not trying to prove God. I'm trying to prove the Bible is correct in its order.
Okay.
The Bible. Okay. So you're trying to prove the Bible is correct in its order. What order?
Well, in Genesis 1, they were supposed to write that down.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Genesis 1.
it's fine. Okay.
I'm saying that science itself verifies the order of Genesis 1 as being correct.
Except that I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the same page that I've looked at for a gazillion years. So if we just go to the index of creationist claims at talkorigins.org, the creation account in Genesis 1 lists 10 major events in this order: a beginning, a primitive earth in darkness and enshrouded in heavy gases and water, light, an expanse or atmosphere, large areas of dry land, land plants, the sun, the moon, and the stars, sea monsters and living creatures, wild and tame beasts, and then man. However, the real order is a beginning, and then light. By the way, light is third in the biblical one, but second here. Then the sun and stars, which is number 7 in the biblical order. Then comes the primitive earth, moon, and atmosphere in number 4, whereas the primitive earth is listed at number 2 in the Bible. Dry land, sea creatures, etc. So the order listed in Genesis does not match the order as identified under scientific inquiry.
Well, I'm postulating that it does.
Okay, well,
cool. Okay, first of all, which cosmology are you doing? Because Matt just read, I believe, from the standard Big Bang cosmology of what the order was. So what are you using?
I'm using the cosmology of David.
The cosmology,
of David. And your degrees are what?
I don't have any college degrees. I got about
I don't care about that either.
College. I do.
And your expertise is what?
I am not a scientist. I am not a scientist, but I have 2 years of physics and air conditioning and refrigeration, and I took astronomy.
I'm not concerned about that. I'd like for you to tell me, what is the cosmology of David? And if your case is that Genesis got the order right, comparing it to something other than the scientific order isn't going to get you anywhere. You do realize that, right? Like, do you believe?
No, I don't know if we can. You make statements all the time like that, Matt. That science is definitely correct. And if you deviate,
no, sir. That is an absolute fucking lie. I am on record in countless shows of saying, science does not make proclamations of truth or certainty. Science gives us the best models based on the best current information. It is tentative and subject to revision at all time. How dare you accuse me of something that I have not said?
Okay, well, that's the same thing Hitler said. He said,
all right, we're done.
I tell you what, go ahead and hang up on him. I'm going to maintain my mellow because anybody so stupid in the last few seconds to try to say they're going to use the cosmology of David, and when I point out an honest response to an accusation of something I've said, and for the caller to say, well, that's what Hitler said, there's nothing for me to get upset about or mad because you escorted yourself out.
Yeah.
You disqualified yourself. You proved your own argument wrong. You were just calling in to hear yourself talk. And I'm glad that you got to hear yourself talk. I hope that somebody gets you a bouquet of flowers, maybe a nice meal, some chocolates or something, because it's clear that you need attention and affection, just like, somebody who's been abandoned by reason and a family. I'm sorry that your day is so bad that you
And if
decided to compare me to Hitler because of Genesis 1 in science.
Yeah. And if you're going to come up with your own cosmology, at least say, you know, I have been studying cosmologies for the last 20 years or my entire life, or it's been a hobby of mine. I would accept that you might actually, okay, have something interesting. But if you don't say that, then I don't know how you could say anything interesting, because you don't really have a grasp on the basics of what those things even are. So, okay.
I'm going to steal, because I also mentioned 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown. I'm going to steal blatantly and give credit to Jimmy Carr for one of my favorite jokes ever, which is, say what you want about Hitler, he killed Hitler.
This is true.
That is
true.
That is one of my all-time favorite jokes from Jimmy. Jim, thanks so much. This has been grand, and
absolutely.
I hope you had a wonderful birthday. Thanks for steering.
Yeah, you're welcome. We had fun. Anybody
who thinks I was remotely, riled up, can go fuck themselves, because I sat here patiently through all it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I waited through a whole episode just to do that for fun.
Yeah. I get it. Oh boy.
We greatly appreciate all of you who have tuned into the show and been supportive over all these years. We're going to continue to keep doing this and all the other shows. Thank you so much for the donations that came in today. A good chunk of that is going to be going to help get bus passes to homeless people and more. I want to also thank the crew once again, if we can get them up there, because especially, I'm going to single one out. I'm going to single Katie out, because Katie has been steering the call screeners and came to me and was like, hey, is there a way that we can make the call screening work out better? And we came up with a marking system, and everybody's using it, and it has been useful and helpful. And that's because Katie is wonderful and not lazy like me. I would just show up and randomly take calls for an hour and a half and go home.
Yeah.
But we're very appreciative.
And that was actually very helpful in picking the last few callers when we got into crunch time. So I definitely appreciated that as well.
And the last people to thank are the moderators over in the YouTube chat. Thank you to everyone who did not make their life difficult. These are volunteers who are doing wonderful things and trying to make sure that we can have a good show and good conversations. We love and appreciate all of you. I hope to see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Please be safe, and do not forget to vote if you are eligible to vote. Thank you. See you next week.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your life.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No.